Everything my father did was for his family. He grew up very poor on the Lower East Side of New York, and he wanted to make sure his family was in a totally different circumstance, than he was. So that was always first and foremost on his mind. He did things for their visual impact. I think he understood and he knew that he might be the first doing it. I don't think he did it as going, oh, I'm going to start a new trend, or I'm going to do this because it's groundbreaking. When he created S.H.I.E.L.D. and kind of drew Nick's original story, my take on it was, now this was in 1965, so I was a junior in high school, so I used to join him in the studio a lot. But I think my father actually saw the whole Nick Fury thing, basing it along the lines of Goldfinger and James Bond. It was just such a remarkably successful run of films. And of course, my father always saw his comic books as film on paper anyway. So I think, he kind of made that connection. I think he saw this as an opportunity to kind of bring in what he considered really a true leader of men. Not somebody who was a technocrat, bureaucrat, but somebody who could actually inspire other people to do things, somebody with the experience and action of having, say, been in combat and been able to lead. I think the quote was, Fury always considered himself a three-striper, first a sergeant, and then somehow mysteriously wound up a colonel in intelligence. If you want to compare, Nick Fury to James Bond, he's kind of the antithesis, where, James Bond is, Mr. Suave and sophisticated, Nick Fury being just the opposite, just kind of like my father with an eye patch, I guess. Had the cigar, my father just didn't have the eye patch. With the James Bond movies, the villainous organization was Spectre, so Dad came up with Hydra. You had this mysterious villainous organization, bring in some kind of evil Greek mythology into it with the Hydra, cut off one head of the serpent, two regrow. It opens up the whole gamut where you can bring in machinery and gimmicks and weapons. I think he saw it as just a real good vehicle, come up with all these great ideas and stories. For instance, the Helicarrier. He saw that as an opportunity to go, okay, what's new, what's high tech, what hasn't been done. Even in the James Bond movies, the bad guys' headquarters, they had their own island. Putting an entire base, a couple thousand feet in the air with jets, around it, guarding it, was just something that had never been done, very high tech. He had the freedom that it was a comic book, so it didn't matter whether it would actually work or not. It was, who cares? It was a comic book, so therefore anybody reading it would go, oh yeah, that could work. The Helicarrier was kind of an inspiration, I thought. It made sense given, militarily, what's the most powerful ship in any fleet? It's not a battleship, it's the actual aircraft carrier. Which is what is the center of any fleet. The flying car was kind of interesting in that my father pretty much knew everything. When he knew science, he knew history, knew mythology, didn't know anything about cars. He actually came to me for that one. I was kind of into sports cars at the time, so he said, I need a car for Nick Fury that's going to kind of be like James Bond's Aston Martin and Goldfinger and so on. I said, all right, so I just spent a few hours going through my Road and Track magazines and came up with the Porsche 904 and said, oh, you could use this and put miniature missiles in the wheel wells, and he came up with the wheels that would go out and make the car fly. That was my big contribution to the Marvel universe. He's always a very humble guy. It was just part of who he was. He realized that people who were fans of the comics and who read comics were, in essence, paying his salary. And he was just very appreciative of that. When the San Diego convention first started in I think the first one was in 1970. My parents were new to California. I had just moved to California. The biggest thing at the convention wasn't comic books. It seemed to be those guys that parade around as knights and, and go ahead and duel in costume. That seemed to be the big hit that year. My father, he never refused anybody autographs, and people would just come around. He'd sit and sign books, sign artwork, and always enjoyed it. It was kind of more of a, I guess, freewheeling atmosphere. I think he pretty much went just about to every convention in the 1970s. in San Diego and a couple in New York. So he was always very open because he just, you know, he realized, you know, these were the people that were supporting him, and he was always very appreciative of that.